Welcome to Fresnolandia. I'm Jordan Maddox.
I'm Dani Bergstrom.
We're going to start with some headlines. We've been off for a couple weeks. Dani and I have been both working and trying to rest. I think me more than Dani, but we've missed a lot, and so we want to cover some of the things that we've missed. This last weekend was one of the major events of the year in Fresno, Porchfest. How'd it go this year?
So there were, according to one of the organizers who I was texting with this morning, there were about 4,000 people at Porchfest. I think every single person on staff at Fresnoland was there at one point.
Okay. Is that number down from last year with the inclement weather?
It is, yeah. She was telling me that it was, I think they had 5,000 last year and 4,000 this year. And it was, for people who aren't in Fresno, it was about 50 something degrees. It was very cold for Fresno.
Yeah, it was tough out there. I sheltered from the rain in a brewery, and we had to sit there for almost 2 hours because the rain was so. I was looking at the weather service, National Weather Service, like every day, just checking it, and it fluctuated. It was hard to know what to expect.
Yeah. But I lived in Ithaca, New York for a couple of years, and they had Porchfest there when I lived there, and it was the most magical thing. And so when they brought it to Fresno, I was like, is this going to work in Fresno? That seems like such a hippie college town thing to do. And yet you can totally find the hippie college town vibe in the tower, which is lovely. It's probably why I live in the tower.
Yeah. Let's pivot to smoke shops. There's some things that happened at the city level around smoke. That's a tongue twister. Smoke shop ordinance. What's going on?
Yeah, so the contentious debate over how we should regulate smoke shops in the future has come to an end. A narrow majority of the city council voted to basically enact an ordinance that would allow only 7 smoke shops to operate per council district. So we have 7 districts times 7, that's 49 smoke shops total. There's around, rough estimate, 150 across the city. So that's going to be a lot of smoke shops that are going to have to close. And
can they just pivot to like a similar business, or are there like loopholes that are going to be? That's always the thing, right? Like
that is always the thing. It's a lot of regulations are a little bit like whack-a-mole, and so we'll see how this ultimately gets implemented. That is very similar to the way that we regulate cannabis sales in Fresno. There can only be one cannabis operator per council district, and while I understand some of the reasoning behind that, people find ways to get around it. And so actually a lot of the smoke shops have been selling weed and other types of drug paraphernalia. And so they're trying to create less competition, I think, for the cannabis people, because those are the ones who went properly through the system. Anyways, it's a mess. But
yeah, it does sound like a mess. A few weeks ago, we had a conversation about CEMEX and the San Joaquin, and then there's been a lot of rumblings, both at the political level. There's been some town halls. What's the latest?
Yeah, so CEMEX is the gravel mining company that operates currently on the San Joaquin River, and they propose to dig a 600-foot blast mine into the San Joaquin River in their current spot because they want to keep digging. And our reporting shows that basically we have enough gravel in Fresno County to last us for a very long time. Needless to say, there's a lot of union workers that work at CEMEX that are not super happy about the possibility of shutting it down. Assemblymember Rambula has a bill that's working its way through the legislature that would basically shut it down. It's getting a lot of union opposition, so who knows if it will survive this next week. It's getting heard actually today in one of the committees. But there was a town hall where about 200 people showed up in Fresno and said, we don't like this. But if it doesn't, let's say the Arambula bill doesn't move forward, it goes back. It's still planning to go through the process in Fresno County for land use permits, so it still will be heard by the Fresno County Board of Supervisors probably in the next few months. So we'll keep you all posted with what happens.
So part of the reason why we took some time off is we had this amazing high-speed rail event in Fresno. We got the CEO of high-speed rail to take some time away from whatever's going on to come visit with us and share about progress. So I got to host a panel around equity in the economy. And then Dani sat down with the CEO of the high-speed rail along with a few others. What did you learn, Dani, through putting this on?
Okay, we got a couple of answers and a couple of non-answers. So some solid answers are that the authority is committed to a 2033 timeline for Merced to Bakersfield service that he committed to verbally. That's been under question, so I'm glad we have that. On the one hand, yay, we have a firm timeline. On the other hand, it was supposed to be 2020. 13 years later, I get it's a large infrastructure project. The new CEO went into a lot of the reasons why it has been really difficult to get good, accurate cost estimates. But he did say that his staff is working on a plan to actually lower the cost estimates. And so we should see a revised number in the next few months that will be slightly lower than the current. And that's good because it's very unlikely that as long as Trump is president, that the federal government will be interested in throwing any more money at the project. And there's also some pending state funding that they didn't really have a lot of answers on around whether that's going to happen. So, long story short, it's happening. There was an audience member asked a question about when will we know when it's time to pull the plug, and every single person on that panel like had a look of horror. There is no pulling the plug. Like, this is happening. We are building it. There is no turning back. If we did decide that all of a sudden we don't want to build it anymore, I think the CEO said that it would be an embarrassment for the entire continent of North America. So we don't want to embarrass. Fresno doesn't want to be
That's a smidge hyperbolic, but yes, I agree.
we don't want to be the site of embarrassment for our continent. Let's rep our continent.
Yeah. I learned a lot on my panel just about union jobs, and there's been a lot of success in creating good union work, and we need to do a lot better in terms of workforce training to get people prepared for this kind of work. To close on headlines, we have a rezoning in Southwest Fresno. What's
Yeah.
happening?
So for the super users of Fresnoland, you'll know that we've been covering this rezone or proposed rezone in Southwest Fresno for, gosh, maybe almost 4 years. So just to zoom out for a second, Southwest Fresno has been one of the most polluted and disinvested parts of our city for a long time. And there are many reasons for that. Historic redlining. It was basically slated from the beginning to be the place of the city where people who were undocumented, who were not seen as full citizens in our society, so Black people, Latino people, Armenians, Italians, anyone that was not white way back when was supposed to live in Southwest Fresno, and as a result, private investment did not happen. So there was a huge planning process in 2017 where the community got together and said, we are done being the dumping ground for everything that people don't want in Fresno. We're basically going to say moratorium on industrial zoning. We don't want any more. There's lots of meat processing plants that are awful and other types of industrial uses. We're just done.
Yeah.
And
And we
so,
know the incident rates are high for cancer and chronic diseases if you're in
absolutely,
relatively close.
the data absolutely bears this out. There's actually some data that shows that there's a 20-year life expectancy between people who live in Southwest Fresno versus Northeast Fresno. The data is all there. So they made this plan. The plan said no more industrial zoning. The city then approved the plan, which was somewhat contentious, and then sent a notice to all the property owners saying, hey, we're going to rezone. If you have industrial property, we're going to rezone you to mixed use. What that means is you can still operate, you can be grandfathered in with whatever you're doing now. But if you ever want to expand, or if you ever want to change your tenant to something different or more intensive, like that's off the table. If you want to keep doing what you're doing, fine. So fast forward 5 years later or 4 years later, and there's these property owners on Elm and Annandale, just west of the 41 in Southwest Fresno, who were like, we never got the notice that our property was rezoned and we want to zone it back. And the last 4 years have basically been a fight over that question. And the city is pretty insistent that no, you got this notice, you just ignored it. You thought it was another piece of mail and didn't come to the meeting. And so they're saying we can't get financing to do all of these things, and we want to get more electric vehicles, but our bank says because our zoning doesn't match, we can't do anything. And our reporter has talked to multiple finance experts who have been like, so all of this to say they split the baby. It's 90 acres in question. They split it into thirds. 1/3 of the site did get rezoned back to industrial. And now the other portion of the site is under question. And now they're having this back and forth. The residents of Southwest Fresno are pretty organized and pretty oppositional to this. And the property owners are like, hey, we can't do our basic business that we want to do there. So that's the fight. It just got punted to next month. So we'll probably see it in front of the city council sometime in late May.
All right. Well, keep our eye on that.
On today's Fresnolandia, we are talking about the current backlash against diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, also known as DEI, with local leaders and how they are working locally in Fresno to close opportunity gaps for Fresno's Black residents. Today, we have Eric Payne, a former elected official and executive director of the Central Valley Urban Institute. We have Keshia Thomas, who is the executive director of the Fresno Career Development Institute and who also serves on the Fresno Unified Board of Trustees. And we have Lynisha Senegal, the CEO of Vision View, which is an incubator and training center for entrepreneurs in Fresno's Airport District. We're glad to have you all on today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for having us.
Keshia, let's start with this big national debate over diversity, equity, and inclusion. Sitting at Fresno Unified in your spot, how do you see that pushback against DEI playing out locally? And what do you see as driving that pushback right now?
Literally, we have a space where they put us in a space where they feel like it's an affirmative action, right? The DEI was not meant to only help Black people. And it has not helped us as much as it's helped others. It was created to help Caucasian women, to help Latinos. It really hasn't. Now, let me say, I said that to say this. A lot of programming that we have where it's DEI centered at Fresno Unified School District has been slightly impacted because now we have to be always on the offense instead of the defense. And we have to constantly think about, what do we have to do next? Are we going to be sued? We literally have, and I'm not going to call the name of this entity, but we literally have an entity trying to sue Fresno Unified School District for having A4, the African American Academic Acceleration Program, where we know that the African American kids have been behind the longest. We have a Latino and an African American graduation. And quite frankly, let me just speak as a person who sometimes people don't always understand you. How is it that I have to go see my kid graduate and I don't know a darn thing about what's being said? Those types of spaces are some of the spaces that we're having difficulty figuring out, how do we continue forward when people are trying to pull us backwards? And it's been difficult. So just to say the least, those are only 2 programs that have been impacted so far, but we have a whole DEI space. I don't know how many hundreds of employees work in that space. So prayerfully, things don't move backwards as far as we think they will. Hopefully somebody will shut this down where we can continue doing good work for good people. Go ahead, Lynisha. Because I'll go on a whole bandwagon about DEI and the expectations of things that it's supposed to be doing that it can't do because we've been put in a space where we're in standstill.
And I think that it has a lot to do with just basically coming down to 2 points, socialism versus capitalism. Those who are in power, unless it's benefiting them, the wealthy, the priorities are usually focused on. When we think about perpetuated poverty, who's going to be the winners? And most of the times in low-income neighborhoods, when we think about even initiatives like empowerment zone and enterprise zones, it's usually the wealthy who come in those neighborhoods, strip the community of their opportunity to develop wealth, to be able to have access to ownership in those neighborhoods, to be able to have access to long-term stakes in actually developing their built environments. But they come in and they get tax credit and they tout that, okay, we created jobs, but the long-term sustainability and their long-term investment in these communities are usually stripped. And again, when it comes down to who's benefiting off of poverty, it's usually the wealthy and capitalism. I was listening to the immigration conversation earlier today. And here it is that they've taken people from their homes, but yet they've developed these housing camps for families, family housing camps, which is still a form of socialism, still a form of developing welfare and helping family to be able to house families. So you've divested in other ways to keep families together, but have now put them in a camp where you're still having to pay for it. So we're not saving money, but now you privatized it. Right. So again, it's how do we, at the end of the day, who's the winner and the losers of this when we think about socialism versus capitalism?
All right, let's talk a little bit about criticism, this is something that's come up. And I separate these into two categories: good faith and bad faith criticism. Like there's people that are in the system, people that I know that work in DEI programs that just want them to be more effective. And they're being critical internally from the system to in a way where they're frustrated where they're not meeting the goals of the programs. And then you have people outside of it they're in this political echo chamber where they're just hearing words and they've developed some associations. So I'd be curious how you guys think about the landscape of criticism around DEI programs, and how do you think about that topography and like what's valid and invalid in terms of feedback that these programs get?
One, I think you need to be making the necessary financial investment to ensure that progress is being made in the DEI framework. And then secondarily, I think it's the data tells the story. And the final thing that I would say is you have to have the political will within the culture of the organization to see the type of change within the framework to make it successful. So if you are just hiring a chief diversity officer within your organization, but you're not allowing them to make the critical changes that are needed to transform the organization, then it's just a dog and pony show. And you won't see any real critical change, especially if you're not investing the significant resources within the body of work.
So it's more virtue signaling than actually efficacious for the organization, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Keshia, I'm wondering if you have more to say about that specifically in your context. There's plenty of data that Fresno Unified has about opportunity gaps and disparities, and it's really clear where investment needs to be made. And the district has created a lot of really targeted initiatives that you've already mentioned to really address some of those opportunity gaps for kids of color. And so when are those initiatives meaningful, and when have you seen success? And where do you feel like there are still places where there could be improvement?
I have to always start with who you hire. If we don't hire the right people, then the idea of having these initiatives be instrumental in change are worthless. And we don't always know people's true hearts. We have to fill it out. But I'm going to say for individuals where we stand, it helps. It is truly helpful, and it's imperative for educational purposes for people to have that sense of belonging. I want my kids to know we're going to protect you from ICE. I want my kids to know that if you're in a divested community, that we're going to feed you because there's a deficit of food equity, right? I want my kids to know that, okay, you're not getting the education that you truly deserve, or you're being targeted or bullied or whatever, and employees as well. I can't minimize the fact that where employees are concerned, they sometimes have those same issues. I believe in our system, it's been truly helpful, but I also believe that there's some data points that if you don't have a return on investment, that you have to go back and decide that there needs to be a pivot. So let me say one more thing and then I'll pull back. And this is why I believe that Misty Herr was one of the best people for the job, is because she's experienced a lot of the diversity issues in her own experience, not only as being a student for Fresno Unified, but heavily being an employee and now a superintendent. Things being put in her mailbox, her kid being targeted. So this is what the DEI is specifically for, to make sure that it's inclusive and that we're really helping people.
And Danny, I think one of the other things that I would say to piggyback on what Keshia is saying, that diversity, equity, and inclusion goes beyond those three pillars. It's also about access, right? So it's really DEIA to ensure that we're creating access points for those that are most marginalized, whether it be our educational system, whether it be in local government, to ensure that there's a diversity of thought and that those that are most marginalized are represented in the conversation. And we can see the necessary changes within the system to ensure that we're pushing and we're pulling in healthy ways to really transform and create the impact that all communities want to see.
Yeah, can I ask you, Keshia, a follow up on that? I was a classroom teacher for a decade, and I would often go to wonderful trainings. We'd get amazing materials, and then it came time for deployment, where you're hoping that a huge staff of educators, support staff, they're going to implement these programs with fidelity. Like, how do you ensure all that? That's something that I thought about a lot and was uncertain of, like, how do you improve that process?
So another thing that I feel really proud of and being in the spaces I've been in where education is concerned is I've been a teacher, elementary, junior high, and high school, and college. I know what it's like to have a staff member say, you're not supporting me because I'm the principal or the vice principal. And I'm saying, okay, my idea of support is not your idea of support. Can you tell me how I can better help you? If we get more of that, it'll be better not only for our teachers, but better for our students. Now, I said that to say this. With our new direction, we're completely trying to be student focused. So if you watch our board meetings now, they're much different than they used to be. We want to know data. I want to know how many kids are reading from this last test so I know what we need to do next. Now, all that is the work of the superintendent. That's not my job. I don't get paid the big bucks. I don't make $300,000 or $400,000 a year. That's your job to figure out. And now that we're student driven though, and we want to know those outcomes, she's more intentional in being a teacher and a vice principal and blah, 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 right? She's more intentional about tapping into her principals who should be responsible, right? If somebody's not doing what they're supposed to be doing, then sayonara, this is not for you. So that I am very proud of the students' outcome and student-driven work that we're doing now. And so I believe in moving in this direction. I believe our kids will be a lot better off and a lot happier. So yes, I get where you're coming from because when I was in, we'd adopted a new math curriculum and we don't have any math books. What are we doing here? Funny,
Know
not
all
funny.
about that.
I'm just saying, funny, not funny. So yes, I believe that we're moving in the right direction where kids are concerned. And I can't wait to see the data to see if we're really doing good work.
But there is this thing that Lynisha, you touched on earlier, which is that there's been a lot of systemic underinvestment or disinvestment, or in sometimes like intentional harm created in a lot of these communities that over time has created sort of a culture of low expectations of why are we putting in the effort, nothing's ever going to change. And so how do you change that mindset within a lot of people in Fresno? They don't always see it as racism, and yet it ends in a lot of racist outcomes at the same time.
And on that note, I believe too that we broke the system, because I can't speak for Eric and Lynisha, but I can almost promise you they feel the same way I do. We fight, we get tired. I'm tired. I got to take a break from fighting. It's a continuous battle with getting people to do what's good for people. Let's excommunicado the people's, what they look like, their skin color. Let's talk about just what's wholesomely good for, and they said Fresno unified, unifying Fresno. That's my new term. I want to unify Fresno. How do we figure out a way to unify Fresno where everybody is thinking about everybody else and not only being selfish? I get so tired of fighting. You guys have no idea. Let's just do what's good for kids. And that goes for housing. There's the housing deficit for African Americans owning their own homes. Oh my gosh. Let's think about pricing. I'm going to give you a prime example. My birth kids, my babies, they were selling their house and they had pictures up in the house. The people walked in and said, oh, it's too dark in here. We don't want this house because of the pictures. Are you kidding me? The racism is, and it's hard to get rid of it and then we always say it takes a village. Guess what? I don't trust the village.
Yeah.
So we have to figure out how are we going to fix the village. And I think a lot of the work and I'm going to say all of us do, including Lynisha and Eric, is we try to bring the community back together and just say, just trust me for a minute. Just let me find some milestones that are amazing. Once we find that one milestone, then we'll figure out the next one. So those small things are important.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And Lynisha, another thing that you've brought up is, or I guess Eric, going back to your point about the importance of access. So much of the wealth in Fresno has been created because of people finding ways to get government contracts to build roads, to build buildings, to build housing, and government policies that made their wealth possible. And so you work with a lot of successful entrepreneurs at Vision View, and how have you helped prepare them to get more into those wealth pipelines that we have in Fresno?
I'll take a step back before I dive into that. Because I also serve on a number of corporate boards where I'm able to see some of the data. And as we advocate behind the scenes on ensuring that we have these pipelines for small businesses to be able to have access to those contracts, And the data shows a widening gap. Let me just say it this way. So when we think about the number one consumers, African American, Black and brown people, in these corporations, the mix of representation doesn't really reflect the people who actually purchase or the number one buyer of their goods and services. And so when we think about representation, the reason why we advocate so strongly is because we're the last ones that really own anything. When we think about growing up, they teach us in schools not to be the owners, but to be the employees. And then when we get in these institutions, we have been educated strongly to be able to contribute to the culture of that organization and building the brand and all of that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, the leadership representation doesn't look like us. They don't care about us. The investment in us, you're here today and you're gone tomorrow. So there's this large exodus of especially like Black women in a number of these institutions where sometimes you just don't fit because of this growing trend, and being vocal about, hey, we want to be represented. We see the numbers, we're seeing the data that just doesn't reflect our contribution to these economies.
Eric, I want to ask you, you recently organized a town hall for Black and African American leaders in Fresno. What were some of the key things that you learned from that town hall, both in challenges people are facing, but also opportunities?
Yeah, so I'm here today in Sacramento to share some of our findings from our public hearing at Fresno City Hall, which was shaping the strength and resilience, shaping the future of African American families in the Central Valley. And some of the common themes that we heard from those that gave public comment and those that gave expert testimony is that Fresno is a really bad place to live for Black people. We heard some of our experts say that. We heard residents say that. We heard that there is a brain drain of intellectual capital in our community, both in communities like Madera and Tulare. And I think common themes that centered around disinvestment in businesses, disinvestment in nonprofits, disinvestment in housing opportunity, more people wanted to see more affordable housing access. And I think folks had talked about job opportunities or the lack of job opportunities for Black residents in our community. And I think the simple things that we've always heard, right? West Fresno wants to see a bank, right? This is something that residents have said for decades, and all we've got until this day is an ATM machine in the community. And so what we see is institutional leaders breadcrumbing us, and what we see institutional leaders and elected officials who are not representing our needs. And this hearing was to serve as a platform to educate them and others on the urgency of now and what DEI is doing around the challenges and what DEI could do more of as we look at the opportunities in the future.
Yeah,
And
so
if
I definitely have something to say about that because I've lived in West Fresno most of my life. We had a Bank of America, and post-COVID, it went away. And not that it was a very good bank. It was not a very friendly bank. It was not a very nice place to go. And the fact that I have to go under the bridge to actually get to my bank or to my credit union. I'm happy that EECU is doing something with our West Fresno City College, and I can't wait for that to come to fruition. But in the meantime, think about how many years we went without a grocery store. And even now, the grocery store that we have sometimes on Sundays, which is when most people shop for the rest of the week, that store has so many people in there. I'm ready to throw the groceries down and leave. But I want to feed into my community because if I don't buy and sell in my own community, the dollars aren't coming back. And so a lot of our dollars are spent in other areas. And it's not really fair to us as people in Southwest Fresno to have to do that. It's the reality. I'm not belly aching about it, but yes, I am. But at the same time, where are the investment dollars? Okay, $70 million. Okay, great. That was wonderful. We've created some great opportunities for people in Fresno. But here's the other place, and I got to jump back and I got to hurry up and stop talking because I just feel like I'm just taking over. So here's the other place for that. We have a space to build houses, and then they wanted to do apartments. Why are you bringing apartments over here? we have affordable housing, but we don't sell the affordable housing to the people who need it. We sell it to, like Lynisha said, the investors. In 2006, the housing market here skyrocketed in Fresno because we had so much land to sell. We needed more opportunities, and a bunch of investors came in, bought a bunch of houses, and now a house that cost me $60,000 to buy is worth $250,000. And I'm not crying about that, but I am crying about it because it's people who can't afford to buy homes like that. I don't know if I could afford to buy a house right now in Fresno, another one.
Yeah.
Because it's just that bad. Go ahead, Lynisha.
Yeah, and the other triggering point for me on that is we have a lot of these legacy landowners that are holding on to these properties. They don't have any real investment in our neighborhoods. They acquire these properties from their families who have left it as a part of their estate. They're waiting for, like in Fresno, we're waiting for the high-speed rail to come. They've held this property for 30, 40, 50 years, haven't done anything on it. And then you have people who are hoping for an opportunity to see their neighborhoods transformed. But these landowners, they barely, if the city decides to enforce code and in making sure that these legacy landowners maintain their vacant lots or some of their dilapidated buildings, we as the residents in small businesses in these neighborhoods, it continues to depress our opportunities to really see a vibrant neighborhood. And we're trying to get our lawmakers to say, look, we have some solutions if we can create a public-private partnership conversation on how we can protect our neighborhoods. Our small businesses and our residents, we want to be a part of the solution. But oftentimes it goes on deaf ears because we don't have the capital or we're not lobbying often in these places and with these lawmakers. And so we just want to be able to have a stake in what our neighborhoods look like. Here it is. I was doing some research the other day. Here it is. I was looking for just a good study around like when we think about wealth empowerment zone and enterprise zones, as I was alluding to initially, we have so many studies on the adverse impacts of housing incarcerated individuals. We have so many studies on families in housing projects and the adverse outcomes and how that continues to perpetuate that mindset of poverty. But I could not find a study that shows that with the right inputs and the right investment in neighborhoods concentrated in a particular zone in which individuals, residents, small businesses are all playing their key role to have an invested interest in the makeup of that neighborhood. I couldn't find any studies. And so I would like to see our lawmakers be open to have that conversation on how their investments are not returning on the investment in the neighborhoods in which we're thinking should benefit our communities. This is the return and the trickle down effect isn't trickling.
And I think to a large degree, like we're doubling down on these statements around greater investment in Black communities in our region because we've seen philanthropy close the door and gut investment to Black-led, Black-serving organizations. They're holding the purse strings and they're not implementing an equity framework to better meet the needs of the community. And a lot of these foundations, both state, local, and regional, whether you're the Sierra Health Foundation, the Central Valley Community Foundation, the California Endowment, Irvine Foundation, and you have a vested interest in the work in the Central Valley, but you don't have our leaders at the table. You're not investing in our organizations in an equitable manner. We don't see people that look like Lynisha and I and Keshia working at these organizations. And so we're being left out. And we're calling on the governor to say, hey, if you're going to use these entities as regional investment arms for our work in the state of California, they're going to have to do better. And we're calling on folks to do better. And we hope that our public hearing was able to educate folks on what really needs to be done in our community.
And when you talk about purse strings, Eric, I'm glad you said that, because between Eric and Lynisha's conversation, then we talk about going to the bank to get a loan. Do you know how many loops I have? Yes, ma'am. How many loops I have to jump through just to get a darn loan to buy a home? Even if they know that I have the capital to do it and I have something to fall back on. It is crazy the amount of people that turn you away in terms of money when you ask for money.
So I want to pivot to what you guys talked about also at the hearing that you had in Fresno, which there are a lot of really interesting programs and initiatives that are happening that are showing a lot of potential. And I just want to hear what's keeping you optimistic right now on that front. And Keshia, maybe I'll start with you.
So let me tell you, in doing the work in the community, not only working with my kids, but doing the work in the community is really what made me want to pivot and run for city council. I have done this program. I partner with Fresno Metro Black Chamber of Commerce on a lot of programs, but this one in particular came from the TCC fund. So we had to come up with a creative way to support the deficit of transportation. So at the time when Dr. Little took over, we had already been working on this program, and then COVID hit. And then they put stop payments on our money. But guess what? We kept going. Even though we didn't have no money, we figured it out. Because again, somebody else is holding the purse strings, right? So that's when they came up with the creative way to have rideshare on steroids. So we have these wonderful electric cars because we know our air quality is bad in West Fresno. We have these wonderful EV Works cars, WERX, and you can download the app. You can sign up all you got to have is a driver's license and a way to pay. You don't have to have a major credit card to use the cars. They're not crazy out of control with insurance. It's $35 a day and everything is included. And so we put them in we partner with the housing authorities and put those cars in housing authorities where people could just use them. Two stories that I think I told. Number one, the first story is when we had a young man use them to Uber Eat, and he paid his way to buy a car. And he didn't need our cars anymore. He lives in the housing projects. It's amazing. He got him a job, he got him a car, and now he works. So he's an entrepreneur. And the second one is people actually being able to we always talk about North of Shaw, how many people get North of Shaw. So we had a family get to take their first family trip with one of our cars. So these are the ways that we've been able to partner with the community. And now we have ride share for seniors, $35 a month, and they get 4 rides. We have a space where we can transport people who are not only students. We have a student project that they needed transportation and they didn't have any money. Guess who they call? They call the chamber. Hey, can you guys give us 3 vans so we can transport these kids to this thing? So now we're really helping the community in a space that is awesome, and it's not costing a whole bunch of money.
Lynisha, how about you? What's keeping you optimistic right now?
So I would say Vision View overall, as I talk about ownership and seeing small businesses and residents who, like myself, who started out with a 540 credit score when I acquired Vision View, did not have the capital to be able to actually really make any real movement. But I got one opportunity from someone who said yes. And from that day forward, I have been driving that place for an opportunity for small businesses to develop and scale. After 7 years of investing in Vision View, purchased it at $2 million, paid it off in 7 years. I am a living testament of what it looks like with the right types of investments between public, private, community, all investing together. And then with that investment, how we can leverage the ownership and the equity to ensure that our communities have a place in which they will never be displaced, that they have what is my return on investment driven, but we're creating an opportunity where we have an economic solidarity movement where we can create the right opportunities for small businesses who are being displaced. Now, that instead of them worrying about whether or not they can continue to stay in business or to focus on their mission, here it is a place that is welcoming for them, that will help to sustain them while we all get through it together. I'm in this for the together.
Eric, close us out. What's keeping you optimistic right now?
I think what's keeping me optimistic is our community partners and the leaders that are supporting our work, right? It's the Fresnolands of the world that are helping us elevate our story and in an innovative and creative way through podcasts and through storytelling. It's our friends over at CEMEX who are recording, are hearing, and getting it out into the metaverse. It's leaders like Keshia and Lynisha who are from this community, from this region, and are committed to doing the work that keep me inspired, right? It's organizations like Breakbox Collective, it's organizations like the Fresno Metro Black Chamber, it's entities like Access Plus Capital that are resourcing our community through investment of our small business and micro businesses. It's the residents that actually care, the ones that showed up to our hearing, the ones that want to see change in our community. And it's the grandmother and the nana that was praying for us that couldn't come out. Those are the people that keep me inspired to move forward with this work because it is hard. It does get difficult, but I think that there's a level of reassurance that says that gives me optimism in our education system, whether it be Central Unified, Fresno Unified, State Center, Fresno City College, Fresno State, that those entities are willing to make the commitment to serve Black families as we look for prosperity in our community.
So we're going to close with our favorite segment, which is what we're loving this week. I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm loving two things. And both things I did this last weekend. The first is Porchfest. I was very worried about it because it rained on Saturday. And Porchfest is an outdoor event with sound equipment. And Fresno came together, put up a number of pup tents and different things, hunkered down during the rain between 11 and 1 p.m., and then just got right into it right after the weather stopped, which I had a little like lack of faith, but Fresno reassured me that they will push through things. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'm loving this week is I finally got to see Sinners. I've decided I can just watch Michael B. Jordan do anything. Like he could cook eggs, he could tie his shoe, and I'll probably pay to watch it. But combine him with Kugler and vampires and the blues, and it's just like a feast for your eyes. And so I absolutely loved it. There's one particular scene that takes place in this barn where you go through the history of music while they're dancing. It's incredible. And yeah, if you haven't seen it yet, it's definitely a theater movie. Like you should see it at the movies, 100%. And I loved it. Keshia, what are you loving this week?
I'm loving being on the right side of the dirt.
Excellent.
And I can't just say how much I'm just loving family and friends. And that's always my go-to. And I love to cook and stuff for them. So just being with family this weekend, and now they're here in Fresno. And so I'm just cooking and hanging out with family. And I have to always appreciate that.
What about you, Eric? What are you loving this week?
I think I'm loving two things. I'm loving that West Fresno residents are pushing back at the industrial rezone application that the city's bringing forward in the neighborhood. And I love our bill in the legislators being sponsored by, it's the California Reinvestment Act being sponsored by Assemblywoman Bonta that's being heard in committee today that talks about community reinvestment in our neighborhoods and our most underserved communities. So those are two things that I'm really excited about. And I'm excited about the future of Fresnoland. Three things I'm excited
There
about.
you go. All right, Lynisha, what do you got this week?
I'd have to merge both community and family, seeing a number of organizations champion efforts in the airport district, which, as just the history of the Fresno Airport District, there really hasn't been much, but now having a green space in which families can have access. And it just warms my heart to be able to see our family and our community merging together to take place,
All right,
to shape
Donnie.
our community.
Perfect.
And
Donnie,
I love the placemaking that's like happening around the airport district. That makes me really excited. And maybe I'll say that's one of the things I'm loving is the airport district becoming even more of a destination. The new mural at the airport is lovely. but that'll be just one of mine. The other one is I'm loving the game on Nintendo Switch, Just Dance. I play it with my kids at night to get them really tired before they go to bed, and it works wonderfully. And
I have not played. Give me the quick recap. What happens when you play?
it's just, you just literally dance. You just hold the controllers and you dance, and they give you moves and you have to follow them. And usually it's Dua Lipa or Kelly Clarkson, or it's pop, or they have a lot of Latin songs in there, which is super fun. And anyways, it's the best thing I have to get my kids to go to sleep on time.
I
So
might
you
need.
know they used to have a Michael Jackson one. Now you're gonna make me go see if I can find the Michael Jackson.
That would be amazing. That would be
Yes.
so incredible.
I may need some video evidence of this dancing. Thank you, everyone, for speaking with us. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Danielle.
Of course. Thank you
Eric,
guys so much.
yeah.
Really appreciate
Yes.
your time.
Thank you, my friends.
This has been Fresnolandia. I'm Jordan Maddox.
I'm Dani Bergstrom, and this podcast was recorded at Sun Stereo Warehouse in downtown Fresno. Audio editing and mixing was done by Jordan Maddox. Our lead image comes from Vaughn Ballanon, and our song comes from Stateless Rat.